Hi amigos, my name is Pam and I read a lot of books, and today I'm here to talk about all the books I read in the month of June. So let's get settled in. I've got my huge coffee because it is 4th of July morning. I have been feeling pretty glum in general, just about the world and the country as a whole. I've been trying to read some uplifting books to get me out of my horrible mood that I've had for the past few weeks, but it's been a struggle, I'm not gonna lie. Today, I feel like the weather agrees with just the state of the world because it's very dark and gloomy, and I'm gonna try my best to be positive, but yeah, it's been a rough go this first half of the year, but we're here to talk about some books. I read a lot of LGBTQIA books for Pride Month, so all of these will have some queer representation in some way. I'll talk about that, but yeah, there's a good variety here just in terms of like genres and moods in these books, so I'm excited to talk about them all, and I think we should just get started. Grab a drink, get cozy. And the first book that I'm going to talk about is an audiobook. I read The Charm Offensive by Alison Cochrane. This is a queer rom-com. It is inspired by The Bachelor. So we follow Dave, who is a producer on Ever After, which is, basically just this universe's The Bachelor. And he loves working for the show. He grew up watching the show, but as a gay Indian man, the stories that were featured on the show were never stories that looked like his. But still, he believes in the show's mission, and he believes that people can truly come on the show and find true love. So we're following him as a new season is starting up, and the new lead on the show is Charlie, who on the surface is, the stereotypical lead for this type of show. He's like a tall, handsome, blonde bombshell of a man, but the way that he got on the show is kind of interesting. He's basically like a plant on the show. He is a rich millionaire young tech startup founder, but he's kind of fallen from the graces of the Silicon Valley world. So he came on the show basically to repair his image. But once the season starts shooting, it's very clear that Charlie is really uncomfortable with being the lead. He's really uncomfortable being in the limelight, and he just doesn't really like the premise. He doesn't believe in it. He's trying his best, but he clearly just isn't met for this show. He's super awkward and unsure with the cameras and with the women. And Dave, who is a producer, obviously he wants the show to go smoothly. He wants the best for the season. So he starts trying to coach Charlie, and he's assigned as his handler. So he's like, okay, we gotta step it up. We gotta get you more comfortable with the women and with these dates. So they start going on practice dates, the two of them, and then they, start developing a closer relationship. Charlie starts to confide in him, and we learn that Charlie has OCD and he's neurodivergent, and that kind of explains some of the awkwardness and uncomfortable feelings that he has around the show. But then we also start delving into like some of his sexuality. We learn that maybe he's queer, maybe he's demisexual, but these are questions that he's never truly explored within himself. So we just start delving into that. Charlie helps him explore that and become more comfortable within himself. But yeah, they start developing a relationship, and then this makes Dave question the ethical implications of this show and like how genuine some of the producers and executives of the show are. And yeah, ultimately this is a love story between Charlie and Dave. So we just see that play out as the season goes on. Overall, I enjoyed this. I thought it was sweet and funny and, good, diverse representation in the characters. I thought the premise and how Charlie became the lead of the show was kind of shaky, and I felt like it was unnecessary. Like, why would this man ever be chosen as the lead of the show? Like, did he bribe producers or something? Like, it didn't make a lot of sense to me, and I guess it was a way to explain like why this man who clearly would, under regular circumstances, never go on a show like this, how he would end up in this situation. But I just thought it was like a little unnecessarily complicated. I also thought that the way that some of the women on the show were treated, just like as pawns, basically just here to like advance the story of Charlie and Dave, was not my favorite. But I guess it's kind of par for the course for a dating reality show. I feel like I always come away from any reality show feeling like the women were done dirty, so it wasn't like a new feeling for me. And I guess that's just how it goes when there's like 30 women and only one of them is going to be the winner of the show. Like, you know, most of the girls are going to be treated unfairly. And sure, some of them will be on the show for the wrong reasons, but I just felt like there could have been a little more nuance with how the women were treated. But ultimately, like, it was Dave and Charlie's story, so I understand that we can't like spend too much time like developing the side characters, but there were some fun side characters that I enjoyed. I also appreciated that the world of like reality TV shows in general was treated with some nuance. For a second there, I was afraid that like the takeaway of the whole story was going to be like reality TV show bad and always not genuine and ethically corrupt, but I feel like there was some nuance there. I am just very biased towards reality TV because I'm a reality TV lover, but I feel like I go into it with a critical lens. Like, I always know that what we're watching is heavily produced, and obviously there are going to be a lot of people who have not genuine intentions when they go into a reality dating show. I know that for a fact. And I know that there's a lot of like moral and ethical implications and that it's very complicated. So I feel like I go into reality TV with that critical lens, but at the end of the day, like, I love a good reality TV show. I truly believe in like some of the couples that come out of that. And yeah, I just get caught up in the fantasy. So I'm glad that, you know, those things were acknowledged and explored, but at the end of the day, it was like, yeah, these things can still be fun and magical, and I like that we took that approach to reality TV in the book, even though it was like a little sensationalized for the story. So yeah, I overall enjoyed it. It wasn't anything like life-changing or revolutionary, but it was a fun time, and I gave it 3.5 stars, I think, somewhere between like 3.5 and 4 stars. Okay, next is a physical read. It was a highly anticipated read for me, and it was We Could Be Rats by Emily Austen, who is one of my favorite authors, and this book just cemented that more deeply. This was very much like the other Emily Austen books that I've read, but also she was doing a lot of new things in this, especially in like the format and the voice and the perspective of this book. Her other books have been kind of more straightforward first person narrative, like we're just following one, or I think technically third person, but like we're viewing everything through the lens of the protagonist. And this one was a little different. It's split into 3 parts, and the first part is told in a series of letters or notes, and we learn that they are suicide letters. So definitely I would look up trigger warnings for this book. There's a lot of talk about like suicide and death and depression and mental illness and drug addiction. So there's a lot of dark topics covered in this, but from the jump we know that it's going to be dark because the first section is a series of suicide letters. And we're learning about Sigrid, who is the person that these letters are about. Like, she's the one who is talking about her suicide attempt and why she felt the need to do this. And these letters are not really addressed to one particular person, but she talks a lot about like her family specifically and just wanting them to understand and not like be sad or resent her for her decision. So we learn about Sigrid, and she is in her 20s and she lives in a small town in Florida, and she's just been feeling kind of lost and like she's just kind of afloat through her life. She didn't graduate high school, and we learn about that through her notes, how she kind of feels like she is seen as a failure by her family because she didn't graduate high school. And she has a sister named Margit, and she was always like the person who excelled from the two of them. She did graduate high school and then went on to college, so Sigrid just feels like her family is always comparing the two and wishing that she was more like Margit. And Sigrid also talks a lot about her childhood and how much she feels like everything was so uncomplicated back then, and she wishes she could go back and see the world through that like childhood lens again. And it's very nostalgic and very sad. And we see that like even when they were children, Sigrid and Margit knew that their household and family life was very tumultuous and it was like not a great situation. But when she was a child, she could escape into like these fantasy worlds that she would create, and she just like wishes that she could be back in that headspace of like thinking that there was like a magic to life and that you could like make the bad things go away. And now she's feeling like she's an adult and she can't make the bad things go away, and that's, you know, part of the reason why she feels like her life shouldn't go on. So it's very sad, very dark, but there is also like this magical element to it, and her relationship with Margit is complicated, but like she does love her sister, and we get to explore like that relationship and their dynamic, and it's very heartwarming but also like very, very sad and tragic in a lot of ways. Emily Austen just has a way of like touching on the beauty and sadness of life in a way that's like very real. And in this book in particular, like she really delves into some things that are very relevant in today's society. There's like the political landscape of it all. Sigrid, one of the things that I liked that she talked about in this book was that like as a queer person, because she's a lesbian and her family knows that, and like she is often just put in these situations where because she's gay she has to like be the spokesperson for any social or political issue, even though like she is not qualified in many ways to speak on these topics. But they're just like, oh, Sigrid, what do you think? And she feels a lot of pressure to be like always advocating for social issues and things, and she just doesn't like that she's automatically put in that place. So yeah, like I said, it's split into 3 different parts, and then in the second part we're kind of like shifting perspective and voice, but I won't go into how we shift perspective because, kind of a spoiler, there are like some twists and reveals in the story that would just spoil the book if I went too deep into them. But I really, really enjoyed them, and I feel like other Emily Austen books have had reveals but not to this level. Like this one kind of really stepped it up in its just form and execution, and I was really blown away by how she did that. But yeah, overall I love this book, even though it hurt my heart. Emily Austen just has a way of talking about the world that I really, really love, and I feel like we see eye to eye. Like she sees things that I feel like I'm feeling but like unable to put into words, and she puts it into words very beautifully. So yeah, love this book, gave it 5 stars, but it definitely didn't help my existential dread that I'm feeling towards the world nowadays, but still loved it. My next book was an audiobook listen, and this was a non-fiction historical work called Before We Were Trans by Kate Hayham, and this audiobook is narrated by the author, and and it explores different individuals and communities throughout the world and throughout time who have lived beyond the gender binary that we know and live by in society today. This book is mostly informative, and it kind of breaks down the ways that gender binary constricts us, and it kind of exposes the fact that there's a lot of people throughout history that have lived beyond these binaries and just how expansive gender can really be. And the author is non-binary themselves, and I feel like it was clear that this book was very well researched and there's a lot of nuance in it, but Hayam kind of breaks it down and explains to us like each situation is different, and like this is what we should keep in mind. Like this society back in the day, they didn't really live by our worldview, so this is what we should keep in mind when thinking about their stories. So yeah, there's a lot of like explanations and disclaimers that are very well explored through each story. Because this is strictly like a historical nonfiction, I did feel like it was a little dry at times, and just I felt like it lacked like a personal touch or perspective that I feel like the author, being so close to the subject, could have added like a more personal touch to it, or like I would have loved to hear like the author's journey through like exploring their own gender. But I realized that that wasn't the aim of this particular book. It's really meant as a reference and addition to the trans and queer history. But yeah, it was just more like cut and dry and straightforward than I prefer my books, and like that just makes me engage with books a little deeper when they do have that personal touch. So that's my only like complaint about this book. But I found it very informative and very necessary and important, especially today. You know, I am always looking to expand my knowledge, and I think it's very important that as allies, we really equip ourselves with that information so we can stand up for people whose rights and existence and ability to just go through life is being attacked. So yeah, it's just, I think, a very important time to be knowledgeable and stand up for trans rights and be outspoken allies to that community. So I definitely recommend this audiobook. I feel like I learned a lot through it. My next read was A Prayer for the Crown Shy. This was, of course, a physical read, and it is kind of like novella length. It is a sequel to A Psalm for the Wild-Built. This is a fiction, I would classify it as like cozy sci-fi. It basically picks up right where we left off in A Psalm for the Wild-Built, where we have this society where robots were invented by humans and used to help humanity, but then they became sentient and decided to just go off on their own. They didn't want to work for the humans anymore, so the humans came to an agreement with them that they wouldn't talk to them, they wouldn't bother them, they would let them do their own thing. But then, you know, however many years down the line, like 100 years or something, the robots would check in with the humans and be like, hey, how have you been? Is there anything that you need from us? So in the first novel, we follow our protagonist, who is a tea monk. They go around from town to town in their little traveling cart, giving tea to people, and then also being like a voice of comfort and almost giving like mini therapy sessions to people who come to drink their tea and talk about their problems and issues. But the tea monk is feeling very unfulfilled and kind of questioning their place in society and their purpose. And so they go off into the wilderness, and that's when they run into Mosscap, our robot friend. And this is the first time in many generations that humans have interacted with robots. So they form a bond. Mosscap is here to find out like what do humans need. So that's kind of where we leave off in the first book, and in this book they're coming back into society, into cities and populations, and Mosscap is trying to find out what humans need. This world, these books, they're just like very heartwarming and cozy, and they're great escapes from the real world, because this society is kind of like a fantastical, idealized, socialist world. I really, really love just being in this world. But the first book, the message of that one felt a lot more straightforward. We were talking about purpose and how you don't need a grand purpose in life. It's enough to just be alive. And then this book, I felt like the message was a little all over the place. I didn't quite understand what the main point was. It just felt a little more disjointed than the first one, which I feel like really felt like reassuring and clear. But this one, although it's still very nice and uplifting, I just felt like it was a little more all over the place. I wasn't quite sure what the main message was. And yeah, I just felt like at the end of the book, I didn't see clearly what it was all for. But I still enjoyed being in this world, and it was still like a cozy, nice breath of fresh air. But honestly, I feel like it didn't need to be a duology. It could have just been standalone first book. And both of them are very, very short, very quick to get through. So I almost feel like the first one, if it would have just been like a little more expanded and developed, that could have been a better alternative to having these two books, with the second one feeling kind of not super necessary. But I still enjoyed it for the most part. I think I also gave it 3.5 stars, just because I like the world that Becky Chambers created, and I was happy to be back in it. And it has really good non-binary representation. So yeah, although I didn't love it quite as much as the first one, I was still happy to have read it, and it was a very quick read. So I would recommend the first one more than this one, but if you've read the first one, you'll probably still enjoy being in that world, like I said. Okay, I'm gonna try to just get through these next books quickly because I feel like I'm just rambling a lot. I have things to say, but I don't need to say it in so many words. I'm gonna try to be concise. I'm also hungry. I'm like dying to go eat breakfast, so I'll try to get through these next ones faster. Next audiobook listen was The Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas. I have read Aiden Thomas before. I read their book Cemetery Boys and loved that book. That's probably my favorite, or one of my favorites, in the YA category. And so I was really excited to go into the Sunbearer Trials. This one, like Cemetery Boys, also features a queer trans teenager as a protagonist, and I found a lot of similarities between the protagonist and their journey in the Cemetery Boys and this one. But this one is kind of completely high fantasy. We're in a whole other world, and it's a like Mexican mythology world that's very inspired by like Aztec folklore. And I thought the world that Aiden Thomas created for this series was really, really cool. We start off the book straight away with like a huge lore dump about how the world was created and the different like gods and demigods and different classes. So it's a lot of information right from the jump, and I thought about summarizing it all, but I think it's going to be too much, too confusing. So what you need to know is that in this world, every 10 years, there's a competition called the Sunbearer Trials, where demigods who are children of a god and a mortal, they compete in these trials, and they're trying to become number one to be the Sunbearer. But the catch is that if you compete in these trials and you come in last place, you have to sacrifice yourself to the sun goddess to keep society alive and running. Now, in the society, there's kind of like a hierarchy of gods. There's the golds and the jades, and the golds are kind of like the really powerful, very well-known and respected gods, and then the jades are kind of like secondary, and they're not really seen as all-powerful as the golds. So typically in the Sunbearer Trials, all the contestants end up being golds, and they're kind of like, if we're going to do like a Hunger Games comparison, the golds are kind of like the careers. They're trained their whole lives to compete in these trials, and they're like very eager to be chosen. They kind of see it like as a great honor. And the jades are not typically chosen, so they don't train their whole lives for this. But somehow this year, our protagonist, who is a Jade, he gets chosen to compete in the Sunbearer trials, along with another Jade who is a younger kid than our protagonist, and they're both very unprepared to go into these trials. So he kind of makes it a point to get through and help Chio, the other Jade who was chosen, also get through the trials and not be last place. He thinks it's very unfair that they're chosen because they're Jades and they're the underdogs compared to the gold. So he's like, we're gonna get through these trials and I'm gonna make sure that we don't come in last so we don't have to sacrifice ourselves. I enjoyed this. I have kind of an issue with like action heavy fantasy because sometimes, and this happens to me with like movies as well, I'm just like not an action girly. Like I get very lost and confused when a lot is happening. And this book was kind of all action because we're going like, I think there's 9 trials in the competition and we're just going from like trial to trial to trial, and they're all very action heavy. So every time that a trial started, it just kind of like, it's all a blur to me. I can't really follow that well. And this was an audiobook, so that lends itself to me getting lost in the action a little bit more as well. So yeah, just not my favorite format of fantasy stories. I prefer like the world building and the character relationship dynamics, so there was just like more action in this than I prefer. Another thing that I didn't love in this was it's like a fantasy world and it's like 100% high fantasy. We're not on Earth. This is like a completely different world, but then we're still like, there was a lot of pop culture and like earthly references to things that I was like, we don't need that. Like I'm trying to escape and you're putting me right back in here. So there was like references to like Instagram and social media and things like that, and I was like, it's fun, it's cute, but like I just don't want that in my fantasy novel. But that's just like a pet peeve of mine. But yeah, this was like a very fun world. I loved just like all the Mexican references and like how Aiden Thomas built a fantasy world out of that. The other thing that kind of left me unsatisfied though was that it ended very abruptly. I went into it knowing that it was a series, but I think Cemetery Boys is also a series. It is either getting a sequel or already has a sequel. But when I finished that book, I felt satisfied. I was like, okay, we wrapped up the plot of this story. It could continue, but I would also be satisfied just reading this one on its own. But the Sunbearer Trials, it leaves you just on a cliffhanger. There was no resolution to any of the plots. There was nothing tied up. They were all loose ends. And like, I understand that as a series, like if you went into it intending for it to be a series, but it was just very unsatisfying to me. We do eventually get through all the trials, but it just kind of leaves off on a very open-ended note. And yeah, I don't know, I just like feeling a little more like something was resolved at the end of a book, and nothing was in this one. So I guess I will have to continue the series and see if the second book gives me some payoff. But yeah, we'll see. This one was very fun, very entertaining, but ultimately very unsatisfying in the end. Okay, last book of the month was Natural Beauty by Ling Ling Huan. This book was like a sci-fi adjacent literary fiction book. It was kind of satirical, and it's a critique on the beauty and wellness industry. And we're following a woman who was sought after and recruited to work at this high-end wellness store / spa. And she is the daughter of Chinese immigrants, and she's a musical prodigy, or she was a musical prodigy growing up. She was very well known, and she was asked to come study at a conservancy. From a very young age, she is a piano player. But a few years ago, her parents were in an accident, and ever since then, she stopped playing music. And now she's just working to make ends meet and to be able to afford her parents' care. So now she's working at this beauty company, and as she gets like deeper and deeper into it and her job starts demanding more and more of her, she's very like lured by these products and the access that she has to this world. She starts, just falling deeper and deeper into it, and we start seeing how maybe this place is a little shadier than we initially thought. The writing of this is really, really beautiful. That was my favorite part of it. Everything was very descriptive and lush and beautiful. And then even once the novel starts getting darker and grittier, the writing was still very, very beautiful. Very grotesque, but like in a very poetic way that I really enjoyed. I liked the commentary on just like the cult-like nature of the wellness industry and how these European beauty standards and procedures that we're all kind of peer pressured into getting, they all end up homogenizing us and they rob us of like our identity and our cultures. I feel like the main issue that I had with this was just the pacing of it. It felt off. The first half of the book was like very lingering. It felt very drawn out, and like it helped like the eeriness and suspense of the plot. But then once we hit like the halfway mark, things started picking up, and I feel like they just picked up, and the ending ended up feeling kind of rushed and not super satisfying. And yeah, I just think some adjustments could have been made to make the plot feel more balanced throughout, because I really enjoyed it. But yeah, I just felt like the ending was rushed and not executed very well. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed this. It's very much like the weird horror literary fiction that I enjoy. I had heard this book compared to Rouge by Mona Awad, because I feel like they both explore the same topics through like a literary horror lens. And I definitely see the comparisons with like the focus on the wellness industry and like how cult-like it can be, and like beauty products and getting sucked into that world, and then it being like a lot more dark and horrific than anticipated. But Mona Awad just ends up winning out for me. I liked both of them, but Rouge just takes the cake for me. So yeah, I feel like throughout I couldn't help the comparisons and didn't quite live up to the Mona Awad supremacy for me, but I still very much enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. Oh, okay, I lied. Actually, I have one more book to talk about. I didn't know if I would talk about it because I literally finished it today and we're already in July, but I just want to get it out of the way. It also has like some queer non-binary representation in like a more abstract way, but I'll just go ahead and talk about it. The most recent book that I read and the last one for this recap was The River Has Roots by Amal El-Motar, one of the co-authors for This Is How You Lose the Time War, which is one of my favorite books ever. So I was very excited to read this book. This Is How You Lose the Time War is very unique and magical and fun and told in a very original way. And I feel like this one was very different, but has some of those same qualities that I enjoyed in that one. So this is a story about 2 sisters who live near the river Lys, which is a magical river that's on the border between the mortal world and the fairy realm. And the sisters are from a very well-respected family, and they have like a very magical talent for music. And because they come from a very well-respected and well-known family, they are always being courted by these men who are trying to marry them for their family name. And Esther, the oldest sister, she just has no interest in being courted and being married. She is very mystified by the fairy realm, and one day she meets a being from the fairy realm, Rin, and she falls in love with them. And then ultimately she has to make a choice between following her heart and being with her fairy love from Arcadia, or following the obligation and love that she has for her family and specifically for her sister Isabel in the mortal realm. So this is a very quick book. It's told in almost like a fairy tale like way, very mystical and magical, and the writing in this is just very, very gorgeous. The audiobook, I highly recommend listening to it in the audiobook format because one of the motifs of the story is music and songs and poetry, and in the audiobook all the songs are actually sung and they're very beautiful, and there's also a lot of ambient noise of the forest and the river, and it just gives it this very lush magical quality that I loved. My only complaint of this is that I wish it was longer. I wanted to spend more time in this beautiful world, but I understand the way that it's told is almost like somebody telling you a fairy tale. So it is a quick fable that doesn't really allow time to develop the characters and really delve into them as much as I would have liked, but it makes sense for the format of the story. Yeah, this was very, very beautiful. I kind of want to just replay it in my headphones every night to help me fall asleep because it was just so peaceful and gorgeous. Definitely loved it and recommend. And that brings us to the end of this recap. I feel like I was a lot more low energy. I apologize for that. I really loved most of these books. There wasn't any that disappointed me this month, and I'm very happy for that because the real world is kind of scary and anxiety inducing nowadays. So I'm really, really looking to books to help me escape that, but also just equip myself with information and knowledge and power. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. I just hope that you're taking care of yourself, that you're finding comfort in the things around you. Yeah, I'm very thankful for my community, for my friends and family, and I'm just going to hold tight to that and the things that bring me joy. And yeah, let's just take care of ourselves, take care of each other. I hope to see you in the next one. Hope you're having a great summer. Happy reading, friends. See you in our July recap. Bye.